Welcome back to the Teacher's Lounge. Today we're with Callie Thorpe, teacher at Detroit Merit Academy, and we are talking about mental health with students. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
What is mental health with students? Because I think too often that has kind of a negative connotation of whether that be therapist help or, mental illness. But in terms of middle school, what is mental health?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think that when we talk about mental health, one of the first things that comes to mind is just mental illnesses, right? Depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. So some of those have some pretty negative stigmas, unfortunately. But mental health is actually pretty simple. Mental health is just our social well-being, our emotional well-being, and our psychological well-being. So similarly to how we would take care of our physical body, maybe by taking vitamins or doing yearly checkups, mental health is just what's going on inside of our brain.
So these checkups and updates, what are those?
So for our students, you can really do something as simple as a check-in. I have put an anchor chart up on the board, and it can just say something as simple as, how are you feeling today? And you can separate it into a couple different columns, like, I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling a little frustrated, I'm really angry. So literally just giving them a place where they could come up with a sticky note and, put their initials and put where they're at. And I think from there, obviously looking at your students who are struggling that day, if they're comfortable having a personal conversation with you, you can really gain a lot of insight into what they're dealing with.
So you're putting the onus on the students themselves.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal. I think at the beginning, it's going to fall a little bit more on you to get them there. So you need to be the one to open the dialogue on mental health, because for me, I'm a middle school teacher. For teenagers, being in a room of 30 people and talking about your feelings is not something that they're gonna want to do willingly. But if you start the dialogue and you kind of quote unquote normalize it, it just becomes something in your classroom that you're okay with.
That actually was my question because I remember being in middle school. The last thing I wanted to talk to my teacher about was something going on with me outside of school.
Yeah.
How do you start that process? Because I can't imagine on the first day of school you've got kids ready to talk about that.
Nope. Not unless you know them already, right? But I think it's a slow process, and I think it starts with putting some serious and deliberate thought into your classroom climate and what you want the room to look and to feel like. And from there, I think you have to work on building relationships with your students authentically, not surface level relationships, but really showing that you care about them as humans and want to get to know them. And I think a great next step would be, if you're comfortable talking about your own mental health struggles, and that could be something as simple as, stress or frustration. So voicing that to them. When I'm having a rough day, my students know, and I tell them very honestly, like, hey, I'm really struggling today. Last hour was really tough for me. So I'm sorry if I'm, maybe my patience is a little bit thin, but I want you to know where I'm coming from. So I think starting that kind of conversation really normalizes it and brings it out into the open and makes it okay.
Do you think that is the biggest step into opening them up to talk about themselves? Is that they see this teacher, and often that is, I don't want to say a position of power, but it's somebody they look up to. It's a position of authority that, in a sense, like you said, normalizes it, that it's okay. I might be struggling, but so is my teacher, or so is somebody else. Yeah,
absolutely. They need to know that as adults, we don't always have it all together, and that's okay. And I think that if they see that we're human too, and that we understand, they're going to be more likely to come to us with their concerns.
Do you think, because middle school is probably, 12 to 14 years old, 15 years old?
Yeah.
Do you think they understand the complexities that they might be going through? Or do you think they just know something's a little off today?
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't think they do. I think all of those complex emotions probably feel much stronger for them. Sometimes they're feeling them for the first time. So no, I don't think they know. I think you have to guide them through that. I think a lot of times it's just anger and sadness pop out, really strongly. But when we look deeper at it, like anger isn't always just anger. It might be coming from embarrassment or shame too, right? So identifying some of those more like minute, smaller emotions.
Do you think a lot of this stems from experiences outside the classroom, whether that be home life, whether that be what's happening on the playground, whether that feel, like they're not fitting in, things like that, or?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think that a lot of childhood trauma can come from, what we're experiencing outside of school. But I also think that there is a significant amount of stressors happening in school too, whether that is, bullying or cyberbullying, which we deal with now. Judgment is a thing that happens in not just middle school, but school. I think stressors, perfectionism, I think is something that we don't realize how hard that's hitting our students. So I think it's pretty equal. I think they're facing it outside of school and inside of school. So it's kind of like a double whammy.
Cyberbullying it's an interesting phenomenon to me because it's so new still. Like social media is not that old.
No.
And like I said, I'm 31, and if you brought up the term bullying in middle school, that was just bullying. Like there wasn't another way to do it, but now I imagine that adds just a whole nother layer to.
Yeah. I'm very thankful they didn't have that when I was in junior high. I'm thankful I just dealt with normal bullying. But the permanence too of bullying via social media is tough. Yeah.
Do you think that is the biggest stressor in your students' lives is bullying?
No.
Okay.
No. Maybe their school life, their school community. I think bullying is a big one here, but no, I think being an urban educator, I think the things that our students deal with outside of school is intense.
Yeah. Can you actually witness the progress your students make in terms of this mental health from the beginning of the school year to the end?
Yeah, and it's something I get really stoked about because one thing I notice is you hear them using the language that you might use. So if I say, I'm big on conflict resolution, so you'll start to hear them saying things like that, like, Miss Thorpe, can you sit down with me? There's something I want to resolve, right? And you're like, yes, I love it. Or, we, last year, a big part of one of my specific classes who had needed this, we had family meetings every week. And so, at the beginning of the year, it was very teacher-led, but as the year went on, it was very student-led, and seeing them speak to each other openly and kindly and politely and try to resolve things without yelling was really awesome.
What's that like to experience that your students kind of take control of that?
It rocks. It rocks. Yeah, it is one of the most fulfilling and coolest things you can see. It's the best part of teaching. Yeah.
So you talk about your anchor charts as one way to kind of check the temperature of the room.
Yeah.
Are there others that you can use to kind of check the pulse?
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen and I have done in the past something that I've seen called a safety deposit box. And essentially what it is a shoebox or a small box with a little hole in the top, and you give the students anchor charts or sticky notes or small pieces of paper, and it's a way for them to reach out to you. So you can use it multiple different ways. It could be the student is struggling or having a problem or dealing with a complex emotion or situation, and they can write a note to you and put it into the box. It could also be if they're concerned about a peer. So my friend is going through something and I think he or she really needs some help. Ms. Thorpe, can you check in with them? Or can you let our social worker know? So that's one way to do it privately.
So the hope with those is that once they put a note in, there's the hope that there's a resolution following? Or is it just kind of, I need to talk to somebody about this regardless of what happens?
Yeah, I mean, resolving it would be the best case scenario, right? But I'm not sure if some of these more complex like mental health situations are going to have a fast resolution. I think mental health is like such kind of a slow journey, and it's definitely not linear. So depending on what the problem is, We could have a simple resolution, like if it's two friends who are struggling to communicate, right? Like I can sit down and help you work through that. We could probably do it in maybe a couple days or so. But if something is going on at home and you're really struggling to understand that situation, we might need to get you in with our social worker, and you guys might need to see each other, more regularly.
I feel like this is a big endorsement on you as a teacher in your classroom, because this feels a lot more in depth than just like your normal tattling.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Susie stole my gum. And this feels like actual issues that they're discussing.
Absolutely. And I think one thing, I'm glad you said that, because you have to know that when you open up your classroom and yourself to this journey, you are going to experience situations that are hard as a teacher. So I've had students come to me with cases of sexual assaults or concerns of sexual assault. I've had students talk to me about thoughts of suicide and self-harm. So you have to prepare yourself to be in those situations and know how you're going to deal with that and what you need to do. So you have to kind of ready yourself for that too, and taking on a lot of that emotion too,
And it's interesting you chose the words prepare yourself or ready yourself, because I also feel like you have to prepare and ready your classroom to come to you with that.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like a lot of these checks are doing, that you're providing an environment that makes it okay and even encouraged to come talk to you about that.
Yeah, your classroom climate is so important. And I know, like, as teachers, we know that the first 2 to 3 weeks of the year are, the biggest and the most essential. You set up your rules and procedures and expectations. But I also think taking time to set up the for lack of a better word, the vibe that you want. We don't make fun of each other in here. We're a family. We might be a dysfunctional family, but we're a family, and we don't make fun of people if they're having a rough time or just in general. And if someone's crying, it's okay. We're gonna let them cry it out, and we'll help them figure it out, right? So you have to set the whole classroom climate during the beginning of the school year.
And I assume that's something that it doesn't happen on the first day of school, but
No.
Can you notice a tangible change from the first day of school to when you feel like you're in a good spot for allowing mental health discussions in your classroom?
Yes. For me, I feel like late October to November, I feel like we have established, our climate and our culture here, and the students feel more comfortable opening up at that point.
Do you ever have students open up to each other?
Yes, I feel like I see them more come to me though. I think maybe those conversations are done a little bit more privately, and I don't see them too much. But we've seen some really awesome instances of it this year, with students acting as mentors for other students just on their own, which has been pretty cool.
So you have your anchor chart.
Yep.
You have your safety deposit box.
Yep.
Are there other ways to encourage this dialogue from the students to you?
I talk about it very openly. So I know I mentioned earlier to you before we started that I was really nervous about doing this, and I felt like the nerves and the stress were making my patience a little bit more thin. Like my emotions were a little bit more heightened. And so I told that to the kids very openly, like, oh my God, I have to do this thing and I'm terrified. And they were like, why? You're scared? You're an adult. You're not scared. I'm like, I'm legit scared, So I'm very honest with them about that, like on the daily, or I lost my father when I was pretty young, and they know about my experience with that and grief and how I handled it. So I talk about it, as often as it pops up. I'm appropriately transparent, and I notice the more I talk about it, the more they talk about it. And they'll come up to me and say, Ms. Thorpe, I'm having a really hard day today, and I need to just chill out. And I think noticing that as a teacher, like, yes, we have so many standards to hit, and we have so much test prep to do, but they need that break sometimes, and if you need 30 minutes to put your head down, do it. And
I think mental health in general is something that just on the surface it can affect test scores, but a lot deeper than that, it affects so many other things. Like if you are really struggling with an issue and you feel like you can't talk to somebody, and that's why I think that's the biggest point of getting this out in the open is maybe not solving it to its core, but at least it's being heard and addressed moving forward. And too often I do think things get buried and we're just looking at test scores.
Yeah.
And that's too bad sometimes.
Yeah. But even honestly, if you do just want to look at it in that light, like if academic success is your only goal, right? Let's just say that. Mental health does affect that. It affects how you think, how you feel, how you react to situations. If you are so caught up in what's happening, let's say you have a problem at home, how are you going to concentrate in here?
And I'm glad to hear you say that, because at National Heritage Academies, we put it on T-shirts, we put it on banners, educating head and heart. And, I'm glad to see that that's not just a moniker we put on things.
No.
Because I think it's too important to, again, test scores are important, yes, but educating the whole student. Eventually you have to turn these kids over to the next grade, and they go to high school, and then they enter the job force and college. And I had a teacher tell me not that long ago, elementary and middle school is a place you learn how to learn and you learn how to deal with things.
Yeah.
Yes, the material is important, but when you get to high school and college and the workforce, the real world, you're going to have to harken back on these experiences and remember how you dealt with them.
Yeah.
And if you are just constantly bottling things up, that's probably going to happen when you get older too.
Right. I think too it affects like discipline, at the school, and behavior concerns here too. A lot of our fights stem from just miscommunications and misunderstanding. So if we put some focus on like conflict resolution or healthy coping skills for anger and frustration, the hope is that they're going to default to one of those instead of defaulting to a physical confrontation. And I truly think that if we put the spotlight on mental health awareness more, we would see a serious decline in negative behaviors or behavior infractions.
How long have you been a teacher?
This is my 10th year.
Was mental health a focus all 10 years, or is this something you've kind of learned and...
I wish I could say it was, but no, I would say in about 2014, I started my own mental health wellness journey, and it became a concern and a focus in my life. And I also transitioned during that time into urban education. I was a suburban educator previously. So I'm starting my own journey, transitioning into urban education. I'm starting to look at statistics of how high, trauma experiences are for urban youth. And I realized how important it was. I had so many kids because I have very good relationships with my students. So I was having kids come to school and tell me, my cousin died. My parents are separating. My dad's gone and I haven't seen him in
These are
8
big,
years.
heavy things for middle school kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I realized, this is something I need to do something about. I'm having these problems, and I'm a 25-year-old person at the time, and I'm struggling to deal with it, but I have therapy and I have a really strong family unit and support systems, and I can read a self-help book, right? But they don't have that, most of them don't anyway. And so I needed to be that support for them, and I needed to open their eyes up to some of the things that they could do, and that's when it started for me.
So when it started, where you realized you need to do more in the classroom around this topic, how do you start?
I would encourage classroom teachers, if they have not done this before, have not heard of it before, to look into the I Wish My Teacher Knew movement, which I believe started about 5 or 6 years ago. It was kind of a hashtag I saw going around Instagram. And the idea is that you give your students an index card, and this is done anonymously. And the sentence starter is, I wish my teacher knew. And it is based on, emotional things or complex things. So I always, when I do the activity, I say, if I were you guys and I was a middle school student right now, that's when I lost my father. So mine would say, I wish my teacher knew that I still really miss my dad and I have really hard days, right? And I would turn that one in. And so that kind of sets the tone, and they can dig a little bit deeper. It's not just, I wish my teacher knew I really love Fortnite. Yeah. You want to get a little bit more of the, depth, the meat and potatoes of it. I would encourage any teacher who has not explored mental health in the classroom to start there. And
I feel like that's a nice kind of, you're not completely restructuring your classroom. You're just kind of dipping your toe in. You're providing an opportunity for the students to do it themselves, where it feels like they're providing it without. Because this is something that is very important, but I would imagine can feel a little daunting to a teacher that wants to start. Yeah. So I feel like that's a really good exercise to start. Yeah.
And I think prepare yourself for when you read them for some tears. But when you read them and you see what these beautiful little humans are going through every day, it is going to solidify the importance of mental health in the classroom. Yeah. And I think it will, I know it did push me to incorporate more of it in. So that's where I would start.